Okay, we are in week 5, more than halfway through our course, so kudos to you for hanging in there and getting this done. I really enjoyed this course, and I really enjoyed reading your submissions last week on the collaborative assignments. They were really stellar. Well done. 3 of you collaborated on bullying, 1 of you on tolerance. And I really want to encourage you to go into Blackboard, look at your colleagues' submissions, see how you can meld them with yours, because even though 3 of the topics were the same, the activities were different. So they looked really professional. I think you could combine several of them to do a really nice staff presentation. So I would encourage you to pursue that at some point in time. A couple of reminders about your discussion board submissions. Please make sure when you do your submissions that you're citing your text. That is on the rubric for the discussion board, and I don't want you to miss any points with that, so make sure that you get the citations in. And then just a reminder, a couple of you were missing your responses. Everybody put in their initial entry, but a couple of you missed responding to your colleagues' entries. So in order to get your full 10 points, please make sure that those are all complete. This week's discussion board question reads as follows. Start with a brief explanation or description of the differences between educational aims, goals, and objectives. Then branch into how each is considered during curriculum planning, either from you personally or for your department as a whole, depending on the approach you take. From here, articulate any thoughts in regards to how the backward design model supports the task of considering educational aims, goals, and objectives. So you kind of want to be looking for what is included in this backwards design model. Are there aims, goals, and objectives? Should there be all 3 of those in this unit? A little extra background for you on those 3 terms from Peter Hebowich, who wrote Designing the School Curriculum. This was a text we used previous to this current text. He defines aims as broad targets, not specific enough to direct instruction, but a general outline. Then goals are an intermediate level of specificity. And lastly, objectives are the most precise and instructionally sensitive targets in the curriculum. You will also find these terms discussed in Chapter 7 on pages 204 to 215. And on page 215, there is a table that breaks these down and allows you to compare and contrast those. So that will be helpful to you in answering that discussion board question. There were 2 comments in this Chapter 7 that really struck me that I wanted to take a moment to comment on. On page 207, the authors talk about schools that continually modify their curriculum, but their instructional practices seem to change little. This is where my heart is in the changing of instructional practice. And I want to challenge each of you to be thinking about that as you design these units. These are not meant to be units exactly the way you've always taught them, the same way, the same thing. I want you to look at them through fresh eyes and challenge yourself to look at them differently. How can you change your instructional practice? On page 206, the author states that Noddings opines that today in education, we really do not frequently query ourselves as to why we are doing what we're doing. Why are we striving for certain things? And this brought to my mind the TED Talks that I've seen online with Simon Sinek, S-E-N-E-K. If you'd like to check him out on TED Talks, there's a nice short 5-minute one called Start with Why. He also has authored some articles and other TED Talks on the Golden Circle. And these concern the idea of starting with why you do something. before you consider the how and the what. To quote him, he says, "People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And what you do simply proves what you believe." I want to tie this back to your first assignment in looking at your philosophy of curriculum. Why do you do what you believe? Or do you believe things that you're not really doing? So challenge yourself to make that connection. Look at your unit of study. Does it really reflect the why of what you believe? So just a little bit of a challenge there to throw in something that's near and dear to my heart. This week you're also being asked to read the article on backward design. That's on Blackboard already. I want to let you know you don't really have to read the whole article. You can stop at page 18. And it's not 18 long pages of reading. There's a lot of examples and templates in that article. After page 18, they begin to talk about things like facets of understanding and other pieces of this backward design model that we're not incorporating into this unit of study. So don't worry about them. Don't try and put them into your unit. You don't even need to read that part. I do want you to be sure, however, to look at the examples that the authors have put into this article. Jay McTighe and Grant Wiggins wrote Understanding by Design, the backwards design model. This is their article. These are their examples. So you're getting it right from the horse's mouth. Also, on pages 196 and 197 in this week's reading, there's some referrals to this backwards design model. So look through and see what the authors of your textbook have to say about this as well. Okay, let's talk a little bit about your essential questions of the submissions that came in this week. I've almost finished reading all of them. I'm sure that all of you know how to access my feedback because I've had some feedback from you regarding my feedback. But if you don't know how to get that, please email me because that's where I put my feedback on the grading page. A couple of things that I want you to think about is essential questions are arguable. They have no right answer. So if you're asking questions that I can open up a textbook and find, those are not essential questions. They might be good questions. They might be questions that need to be answered during the course of your unit, but they're not the essential big idea questions. They are not yes or no questions. So keep those two parameters in mind, not yes or no and not definitively answered. However, I do want you to encourage to hang on to those questions that I have deemed not essential because they can be part of your Stage 3 instructional plan. So the way that this is meant to be considered is your Stage 3 is your content. This is the context through which you're teaching the answers to those essential questions. You're looking at it through a particular lens. So even though I'm stretching some of you to look outside your specific standard and to look at a bigger, broader question, you're still considering that question through the lens of your own content. So I hope that makes sense to you. Whether it's looking at something like a particular war or some event in history, Pony Express or whatever it is, think of it outside the limits of that particular event and think about how that idea of those events, the idea of revolution or exploration or whatever it is that you've chosen for your unit, look outside of that immediate content to find a bigger question. Also, I want you to think about in this backwards design, once you create your learning plan in Stage 3, that learning is going to be what's going to allow your students then to have mastery over the assessment that you construct in stage 2, and that assessment will tell you whether or not your students have understood the essential question that's in stage 1. So each stage plays into the previous stage, so it's very fluid. I would also encourage you this week to start looking at stage 2. This is not really the way the syllabus is constructed, but it's the way that I've always taught it. And it's the way that it's designed to be taught, that you have in mind your final performance task summative assessment before you construct your learning plan in stage 3. So you may not have that all finished and fleshed out this week. You don't have another large piece of this due this week. So if I were you, I would start looking at stage 2. How can you construct that summative assessment? Think about how it might be differentiated for different learners. Think about what pieces of technology you could implant in that assessment. And think about a rubric and how you would score this. What are your expectations for this assessment? When you do your stage 3 learning assessment, you are being asked to construct some formative assessments within each of those lessons. So those will all tie together to feed back into your final summative assessment, but I want you to really have that in mind before you move on to creating your lessons, because that's the beauty of understanding by design in the backward model. So if you have some questions on that, as always, please feel free to give me a call or an email. And I'm really enjoying this part of the course. I really like this process. I like the challenge that students face when they try and make this fit into a current curriculum. And my best advice is to not try and take something you've always taught the same way you've always taught it and make it fit, because seldom does that work. This is not really a textbook type of model. It's a little bit different from that, and it is challenging. So enjoy the process and let me know if you have any questions. Have a great week. Bye.